Я дуже рада далі представити нашого наступного спікера Максим Заїка. Максим проджект-менеджер з зеленого будівництва. Максиме, ви мене, якщо що, поправте, як
Все вірно,
українською
все
правильно
вірно.
звучить ваша позиція, так? В компанії Delta Ukraine, яка має вже, наскільки я знаю, обширний досвід будівництва різних об'єктів, впроваджуючи стандарти зелені, високі стандарти європейські саме в українських об'єктах відбудови. І я дуже рада, що сьогодні з нами є Максим і зможе поділитися цим досвідом з нашими учасниками. Максим, тема вашої презентації теж її озвучу одразу. Сталі стратегії для реконструкції України. Будь ласка,
Саме
даю
так.
вам
Підкажіть,
слово.
будь ласка,
Будь
як
ласка,
краще
так.
українською чи англійською?
Як вам зручно, ви можете українською говорити, і наші перекладачі також будуть паралельно перекладати на англійську. І учасників в
Ем,
будь-якому випадку є
Давайте,
можливість
напевно, у мене
обрати.
презентація на англійській, але давайте я проговорю українською мовою, оскільки все-таки аудиторія більше україномовна. Ось, а панелісти, я думаю,
Аудиторія
зрозуміють
змішана. У нас
змішано.
абсолютно змішана, да, тому ви можете обрати мову, яка вам зручніша. Да, і
Ну, тоді
я нагадаю
тоді
одразу, тут
давайте англійською.
скористаюсь можливістю для всіх наших учасників, що у вас є можливість обрати або оригінальну доріжку, або доріжку з перекладом. Будь ласка, балансуйте між цими двома опціями, щоб розуміти абсолютно все, що відбувається у нас на події сьогодні. Все, Максим, передаю вам слово.
Добре, я тоді буду англійською. I'll go ahead and present in English since presentation was written in English. But if there is any need to explain something in Ukrainian, please free to just stop me and I'll be happy to translate. So my name is Maxim Zaїka. I'm a green building project manager with a company called Delta Ukraine. Delta Ukraine is part of the Austrian Delta Group. We are operational in a number of Central and Eastern European countries, and we have been in Ukraine for the last almost 19 years. As such, one of the things that we try to bring to the Ukrainian market is Western expertise, Western philosophy of doing business, and Western approach to design and construction of projects. And as part of that, we also, I can probably say it this way, that we introduced green building as a subject, as an area of knowledge to the Ukrainian market all the way back in 2015. So here's, you can see on the screen the services that we provide. I'll obviously concentrate on the green building expert, but if you'd like, you can check out our website and get to know our company in more detail. So, you know, we hear everywhere in mass media and in governmental announcements, and there are numerous conferences and events talking about Ukraine's green recovery, where the motto is that we should rebuild it back better than it was before. And as part of that, Ukraine is aspiring to implement green rebuilding, green transition. And the question I think that often arises, or I hope it does so, is what is actually green building? And the answer is very simple: is that this is nothing new in the world. The world has been preoccupied or looking into green buildings for the last several decades. There are a number and a wide variety of different green building benchmarks existing in the world today. And here on the screen, you can see the main ones. So we see BREEAM, which is a British green building system, which was the first one actually to be founded back in the early 1990s. Followed by American LEED system, which was founded in 1998, if I'm not mistaken. Followed by DGNB, which is a German green building system. We also have EDGE, which is a green building system that was developed by the IFC, or the International Finance Corporation, which is part of the World Bank, and which specifically targets developing countries, developing economies, such as Ukraine, for example, because it offers easier and cheaper pathways to meeting green building objectives by utilizing the EDGE system. And we also have some systems which are new a new generation of systems, which not actually only look exclusively at energy efficiency and things like that, but which are more preoccupied with human health. So we have a system called Well, which is a US-based system, and also FitWell. So the short answer is that there are all these different benchmarks, and when we talk about Ukraine's reconstruction, our recommendation would be to perhaps not to invent the bicycle and look for something esoteric, but really turn to these systems and take what you think is the most applicable or the most useful criteria that fit your particular project. So in terms of our experience, now that I've explained these different systems, so in terms of our experience, we are a leading sustainability consultant on the market. As I said, we started back in 2015 by certifying the very first DGNB project in Ukraine, which was a Bila supermarket. It's on the left bank of Kyiv, Poznyky. And actually, it's the first DGNB certified supermarket, was, at least at the time, for also Central and Eastern European region. We also certified a number of Green and Use projects. We were the first one, again, to do this. We started out with certification of Optima Plaza Business Center in Lviv. And then we also certified Business Center Grand in Kyiv in 2020. But I think our biggest achievement so far has been work with Unit City, which, as you may know, is an innovation park located in Kyiv, and which comprises redevelopment of a former Soviet motorcycle factory into a contemporary innovation park, which has a mix of uses, office, residential. There's also plans for school, hotels, and so on and so forth, which is a very interesting project. So, and with Unit City, and you can see the screenshot, the photograph on the slide, with Unit City, the ambition was to LEED certify every single office building that was being built on this campus. So you can see that we LEED certified the very first building in the history of Ukraine. This was in 2019. This was building B12. Prior to this, the only building that had a LEED certificate was the new US Embassy building, but we can argue whether that's Ukrainian soil or American soil, but nevertheless, so we can say that B12 was the first commercial building to be LEED certified in Ukraine. And this certification was followed by certification of subsequent buildings, so B9, B10, B11, and actually you can see them again, all of them on the photograph on the screen. With LEED and with other green building rating systems, you can also certify office spaces. So a company's office, and you'll see this trend very popular among, obviously, companies based in the US or in Western Europe. So for example, here we also certified the new office space for Takeda Pharmaceuticals in Kyiv. This was last year. So this is our track record so far, and we have a number of other projects in works, which were unfortunately either paused or temporarily stopped because of the war. So that really put a kind of a dent into our green building efforts. But slowly but surely, these projects are coming back to life, and we hope to certify 2 more LEED buildings on Unit City by the end of the year or by the beginning of next year. So with that said, based on our experience, and again, the number of projects you see on the screen, is it a lot or not? I mean, given that really what you see here comprises about 90% of all the buildings that have been certified in Ukraine up to date. So for Ukraine, this is quite a lot. But obviously, in the context of Western Europe or even Eastern Europe countries such as Poland, this is unfortunately very, very little. Because if we take Poland, for example, every single major office development, for example, goes for LEED certification. Sometimes they go for several certifications at the same time. This can be a combination of LEED and WELL, or LEED and BREEAM, or LEED, BREEAM and WELL all together. And the reason for that is that being born in different countries, they approach green building a little bit from different perspectives. And so that may appeal to different investors. So for example, if you have a building that's being developed by let's say, a joint venture of an American and British investor. Obviously, the British investor is more familiar with BREEAM, so this is the reason for BREEAM certification, but the US investor may be more familiar with LEED, so hence it also gets certified as LEED. But in any case, so based on our experience and when we think about what are the most fitting, the most appropriate green building strategies for Ukraine at this point, I have tried to narrow them down. So obviously, I don't want to go into presentation of all these different green building rating systems because this is not the point right now, and it will take a long time. What you see here on the slide and on the next slide is sort of a condensed list of key strategies that, in our opinion, should be absolutely pursued during Ukraine's reconstruction. So to start out with, obviously, and this is a topic that everybody's familiar with and is often associated with green building, is energy efficiency. But I hope that when I'm done with this presentation, you will understand that green building is not only energy efficiency, but in fact, it's a combined approach to address different topics related to sustainability. So, but in any case, energy efficiency is indeed one of the key categories in green building, and there is a number of things that can be done to achieve that. So obviously, first one is passive design strategies. So you got to look at how and obviously, if we talk about new construction versus existing building, there are certain things that you can do with new construction that you can't do with an existing building. For example, you can orient it properly, right? So you got to look at sun exposure, you got to look at wind exposure, you got to work with your site, with the sort of natural qualities of the site. The second thing that is absolutely a must is to design building with a good U values for the building envelope. So this is your heat transmittance coefficient. So the lower it is, the lower obviously your facade allows, the lesser amount of heat your facade transfers to the outside and vice versa. So every engineer knows that, and I think architects know that as well. You got to consider HVAC equipment efficiencies. So if you're installing, a cooling and a heating system, the more efficient it is, the better energy efficient the building will be. You have to consider systems automation and controllability. So what I mean by that is that, for example, if we look at the lighting systems in the building, one of the strategies in which consume quite a bit of energy, for example, for an office building, it can be anywhere from 10 to 15%. So one of the things that can be done is, for example, to install daylight sensors and motion sensors. So whenever a person is in the room, the light turns on, but whenever the person exits, the light turns off. And there's a lot of things that can be done with setting up the automation of the building in a way that it conserves energy. You got to look at metering. Obviously, if we don't measure in detail our energy consumption, we don't know what needs to be reduced. So the more comprehensive the metering strategy, the better it is. So not only a building meter should be installed for the building, but you got to meter different energy consumption systems within the building. So it can be HVAC, it can be ventilation, it can be receptacles, it can be electrical lighting, and so on and so forth. Because if you measure these things, then you know where you can improve. And obviously, last but not least, is the use of alternative energy. So your solar panels or solar collectors, photovoltaics, and so on and so forth. And obviously, the world right now is all about decarbonization, where everybody wants to switch from fossil fuels to electrical, because electricity is the only type of energy that can be produced in a relatively clean way, and that's hydropower, photovoltaics, or nuclear even. But obviously, in the context of Ukraine and in context of everything that's happening, this may not always be a feasible strategy right now because, probably natural gas is unfortunately a more reliable fuel than electricity. Moving on. So water efficiency. This is something that I almost never hear in Ukraine as a subject of attention among design professionals. But in reality, it's also a very important component of green approach. So two things need to be paid attention to. The first one is reduction of outdoor water use. So obviously this is the water that's being used for watering, green zones and landscaping and so on. And this can be solved by, first of all, planting native and drought-resistant plants. So not exotic plants that require a lot of water, but plants that can survive on their own, plants that are native to the local climate. And I actually start seeing some of that in Kyiv, for example, where I see that they're planting, not sure what this grass is called, українською це буде ковила, which looks great. It's a wild plant and doesn't need to be watered. So that's a good example. And the second thing that needs to be done is if there is an irrigation system, make sure that it's water efficient, that it's, for example, drip irrigation, which waters only the roots of plants, and that it's not a rotary sprinkle head, which just rotates and waters everything around it, which is very wasteful. And the second component of water efficiency is obviously reduction of indoor water use by building users, and this is achieved very easily by installing low flow and low flush plumbing fixtures. So, your water closets, your lavatory faucets, urinals, shower heads, and so on and so forth. And a lot of water is being wasted, from my experience in Ukraine, because nobody's paying attention to these things. And obviously in older buildings, everything is leaking, so there's even more water waste there. The next category is materials. So the first approach is to use low carbon materials. What is low carbon? So different materials require different amounts of energy to be produced. So for example, steel and concrete are very carbon and energy intensive, meaning that let's say, a cubic meter of concrete requires a lot of energy, and consequently, it causes a lot of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. So, so far, Ukrainian market for building materials is rather limited, unfortunately, but the rest of the world has moved on. So if you look at outside of Ukraine, you can find low carbon concrete, you can find low carbon steel, and so on and so forth. And obviously, a good way to mitigate that is to use materials with recycled content, or perhaps even bio-based materials like the ones that the gentleman presenting before me mentioned. So whether it be straw bales or something that contains hemp or anything like that. Obviously, the obstacle there is how these materials can be accepted by Ukrainian authorities in terms of permits and everything, because maybe some of them are more combustible than regular materials, and so on and so forth. But at the very least, you can look, if you look for new materials, look at their recycled content, because this may not be prevalent in Ukraine as of now, but if you look at any Western European materials, they will for sure have some recycled content. So pick materials with as much recycled content as possible. The other way that you can also approach this topic is to pick materials with environmental product declarations. Environmental product declarations are a document that's produced by a manufacturer of the material, where it specifies the footprint that the production of this material has cost to the natural environment. So, and based on that, you can also conduct a life cycle analysis, which requires a computer program, but the principle of it is very simple. You collect the bill of quantities for all the materials used in the project, and then using some sort of database that has information on the amounts of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere that were caused during the manufacturing of this product, you can tally up, you can sum up the total effect of the construction of your building onto the natural environment. So there's a whole complex methodology to it, but the principle is very similar. It is very simple, actually. And the next point probably relates more to human health, but I'll put it here, so I'll mention it here right now. You can also look for materials with health product declarations. Health product declarations are all about disclosing of the chemical components that are contained in building materials, and that's a direct influence onto human health, which is my next topic, important category. Again, human health is not something that you unfortunately hear a lot about in Ukraine in the context of design and construction of buildings, but which nevertheless is probably more important than energy efficiency, in my opinion. So the first strategy here is to equip building with a ventilation system. And I wrote that it can be mechanical or natural, but I would prefer a mechanical system, because with a mechanical system, you can more reliably supply air to the building. You can also filter it, and you can also monitor it. So, for example, for those who are in Kyiv right now, you've seen what's going on with the quality of air in the last couple of days, where something's burning around the city, and there's no fresh air to breathe. And obviously, you think about hospitals, you think about schools, you think about kindergartens, not to mention obviously residential buildings, where traditionally these buildings are not equipped with mechanical ventilation systems. They rely on the Soviet-style ventilation systems, which do not always, which actually rarely work. So obviously, the air that we're all breathing is poisoned with particulate matter, with dust, with burning debris, and so on and so forth. But there is a way to solve that if you filter the incoming air in your mechanical system. Very simple. You install an F7 or even a tighter filter, and you can filter out the air so that the people who are in the building will actually have a high quality of incoming air. Another aspect is humidity control. It's often addressed, yes, in contemporary Ukrainian practice, but I would like to underline its importance because, again, in the context of the COVID pandemic, which we survived, and there's going to be more of these, but even in the context of just a typical flu season, there is very specific and reliable information which shows that all kinds of viruses and pathogens are easily transmittable between people in a building if the humidity is off. So if the air is too dry, so let's say it's less than 30 or 40% of relative humidity, viruses transmit. And if the air is too moist, too humid, if it's more than 60% relative humidity, again, viruses have a better time transmitting between people. So humidity control is very important, again, from this viewpoint, and also from the viewpoint of the way people feel in a building. And interestingly, the whole impetus, the whole reason for the birth of the green building movement was that scientists and building owners in the United States a few decades ago discovered what's called the sick building syndrome, where people who were working or living in buildings with poor ventilation, without daylight, and so on and so forth, where they were actually exhibiting signs of physical illnesses. And this has been proven since then. So it is, again, very important to make sure that the building is well ventilated, there is enough fresh air, that it is monitored, that it's cleaned with filters, and that its humidity kept within the right range of 30 to 40 and between 60%. Another important aspect of human health that needs to be addressed, which I rarely see in Ukraine, is the use of fit-out materials without harmful emissions. And harmful emissions are, these are typically VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. This can be formaldehyde and a number of other chemicals which are contained in paints, in adhesives, in primers, and everything that is wet applied on the side. So when you walk into a room and you oftentimes experience that smell of fresh paint, this is harmful. And it's harmful to a person that's there one time, but it's even more harmful to somebody who may belong to a vulnerable sphere of population, for example, children or people in hospitals or kids in the kindergarten, so on and so forth. So, and this is, the market has moved on to address this issue a long time ago. So even in the context of Ukraine, it's very easy to find low VOC paints by even going to any supermarket and buying buying that sort of paint. And last but not least, oftentimes during construction of the building, the way that construction is carried out can also have long-lasting effects on the quality of indoor air once the building is completed. So there are a number of things which are sort of best housekeeping practices that can be done during the construction process. So things like, for example, forbidding smoking in the building, obviously for the construction workers. Things like closing ventilation duct openings with plastic film at the end of the day in order to make sure that dirt and debris don't get inside the ventilation system, and so on and so forth. There is a whole list which can be implemented. It's not difficult, but it also obviously requires attention on the construction side. And I have two more, which may not seem that important in the context of our realities, but which nevertheless should be addressed, in my opinion. So the first category is climate resilience. And we see that climate is changing, whether you believe it or not, but you see an increased occurrence of adverse weather events across the world, even in Ukraine. So we get these rainstorms, we get street flooding, we get winds, we get wildfires. All of this is a sign of a climate change that is real. And there is a number of things that can be done to address this particular issue. So things like, for example, again, if we're talking about locating a building, make sure that there's no flood risk. Make sure that the site where you're placing the building, that is not susceptible to floods. And obviously, flooding will be more increasing as we go on. Minimize the area of impervious surfaces. So what that means is that minimize the area of hard surfaces which do not let the water drain in the ground, because the more water is kept on hard surfaces, such as roofs, such as sidewalks, roads, pavements, you got to do something with that water. So in the context of a city, this is why you see why city streets, even in Kiev, get flooded so badly, because all that water gets collected by the hard surfaces and then it's got nowhere to go, or the stormwater system gets overwhelmed, and hence flooding occurs. Rainwater management is a related concept. Obviously, you can capture rainwater, you can let it infiltrate, via soft services such as landscaped areas or green roofs. You can also capture rainwater and store it and use it for things like flushing toilets or for irrigation and so on and so forth. Also, try to use reflective roofing and paving materials. There is a phenomenon called urban heat island effect, where the hard surfaces of roofs and pavements within city limits, they get heated up by the sun during the day, and consequently, the temperatures are always higher in a city than they are outside the city. So this is obviously heating up the atmosphere, and it's harmful. So, and again, because of the climate change that we're witnessing, temperature ranges are constantly increasing. I mean, we had 36 degrees, 37 degrees over the summer here in Kyiv, which is very unusual, but we keep having it. So in order to sort of mitigate this effect, you can use reflective roofing and paving materials. So the whiter the material, very simple concept, the whiter the material, the more reflective it is in terms of being able to reflect solar radiation. So these surfaces that are light colored, they do not absorb the solar radiation, and they stay cooler. And the last category that I would like to mention is protection of the environment. And there's two things here. The first one is avoiding pollution during the construction process. There's a number of things that can be done here to achieve that. So things like, some of these things are required by the Ukrainian legislation, but in my experience, I see that they're often overlooked. So things like installing a wheel wash station at the exit point from the construction site to make sure that the earth and dirt and debris do not get carried away from the site. Things like installing sandbags around the perimeter of the construction site to filter all that rainwater that's going to come off that construction site, and which will carry pollutants to the rivers and streams and things like that. So there's a whole concept behind it, and the idea is to minimize erosion and sedimentation of the natural environment. And another important topic, which, again, unfortunately, in the context of Ukraine, I think has a big implication, and I've seen that it's already been addressed, is management of demolition and construction waste. So here the idea is to decrease the amount of demolition and construction waste that gets buried in our landfills, because they are already overfilled with waste. And this can be done by recycling construction waste, by finding ways to either recycle it, sell it, transfer it to someone, do whatever it takes that would avoid taking it to and dumping it somewhere on a landfill outside the city. So in the context of all the destruction that we have unfortunately experienced, I've already seen some initiatives, and it gives me hope that they will continue and become sort of a standard practice. So in summary, these are the most important aspects of green building that I think could be taken into consideration during Ukraine's reconstruction. And to promote this green building approach, several of my colleagues, also other sustainability consultants with other companies and myself, we have established a nonprofit organization called Ukraine Green Building Council, where we are looking for like-minded people to join us so that we can promote sustainable approaches to construction, so that we can develop expertise, so that we can all learn from each other, and so that we can promote the green building movement on a country scale. Frankly, this is our second attempt. The first council we established back in 2014, but because of the political events that followed and the start of the war back then, that initiative unfortunately didn't take off. So this is our second attempt, and we think that if not now, when? Because Ukraine is really at a crossroads in terms of how we will, which direction we will take our country, and in terms of, in the context of reconstruction, I think it's very important that we pick the right principles to guide our reconstruction efforts. So I invite you to check out our website. You can see it here at the bottom of the page. And you can find the application materials on the website as well. And let's do this. So thank you for your attention. Let me know if you have any questions.